Welcome to Olmec Nation's YouTube channel. The following video is an audio version of our second volume, The Olmec Nation, the First Spiritual Civilized Culture in North America. Lemuria, the continent of the first civilized species. It is written by Dawn F. Jackson and narrated by Natalie Grace Harris.
The Olmec Nation, the first spiritually civilized culture in North America. Lemuria, continent of the first civilized species. Part 1. Introducing Pangaea. About 270 million years ago, a series of events took place on Earth and eventually formed what we call a supercontinent. This series of events occurred due to the breakdown of planet Earth's tectonic plates. This supercontinent was named Pangaea. The giant ocean that surrounded the continent is known as Panthalassa. Most of the dry land on Earth was conjoined into one huge landmass that covered nearly a third of the planet's surface. Transformations to the planet Earth happened again during the Permian and Triassic geological time periods. These were times of great change. By the end of the Permian period, the planet Earth experienced the great mass extinction event in its history. The majority of living species on the planet were wiped out of existence. Great electromagnetic storms overwhelmed the bioelectric fields of animals, humans, plants, and even rocks. Chaos reigned as volcanoes exploded and the oceans and lakes boiled. The earth shuddered and cracked insanely. The Triassic period occurred after the Permian period. This period was characterized by heat, vast deserts, and warm seas. This period ended once again with mass extinction that wiped out many species. The Permian mass extinction wiped out an estimated 96% of the living species, which included the Homo habilis. Part 2. The Hominin genus. The Homo habilis species made the first stone tools called the Oldowan tool technology, which were named after Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. The Oldowan tools were mostly found in Africa, in areas that we call today Tanzania, Kenya, Ethiopia, and South Africa, but they were later on found in Eastern Asia. This is where some of their very first sites examined by archaeologists were found. A few of the Homo habilis characteristics and habits were: 1. Their diet included meat. 2. More scavengers than hunters. 3. Used stone tools to process animal carcasses. Nutrients came from their bone marrow. 4. Preferred using the right hand. 5. Increased brain capacity. 6. The molar and premolar teeth were smaller. 7. Human-like feet and hand bones. And 8. Shorter torso and disproportionately longer arms compared to modern humans. The second member of genus Homo that evolved from Homo habilis was Homo erectus. The Homo erectus characteristics were: 1. They made tools that clearly showed their intelligence, shared cultural information, and planned for the future. 2. Began migrating to Eurasia, spreading their culture. 3. Coexisting with Homo habilis. 4. Brain size was getting closer to the size of modern humans. 5. The facial features included wide, fleshy noses and flatter faces. And lastly, 6. The ridges over the eyebrows became more noticeable. The third member of genus Homo that evolved from Homo erectus, Homo sapiens. The Homo sapiens characteristics include: 1. The face has become flat with a high forehead. The skull was rounded and chin more prominent. 2. Postcranial skeleton, gracile bones, long-limbed, and adaptable to hot climates. 3. Their existence was proven or confirmed on the southern coast of Africa. 4. The diet began to include animals on land and in water. 5. Man-made tools became smaller in size. 6. They began burying their dead. 7. Only in Africa is there a traceable progression of fossils covering the past and through millions of years and showing intermediate forms from ape to man. And lastly, 8. Early humans spent at least a couple million years in Africa before beginning to venture further to other areas. The 4th members of genus Homo that evolved from Homo erectus, Homo floresiensis. The characteristics of Homo floresiensis are: 1. They originated from Southeast Asia around 248 million years ago and were called the Hobbit due to the island's dwarfism. 2. Specimens, including bones, were discovered in caves on Flores Island in Indonesia. And 3. They stood 1.1 meter in height, or 3 foot 7 inches. Part 3. Middle Paleolithic Era during Ice Age. Earth made ice and then ice made earth. The Paleolithic Era is also called the Stone Age. The word Paleolithic comes from the Greek language. The word paleos means old and lithos means stone. This era lasted between 2.7 million and 10,000 years ago. Homo sapiens became human beings. The Paleolithic era is divided into lower, middle, and upper phases. The lower Paleolithic era is the time of Homo erectus, and they were referred to as hunters and gatherers. The middle Paleolithic coincides with the Neanderthals, and the upper Paleolithic period begins in Africa 100,000 years ago when Homo sapiens arrived. They were still considered hunters and gatherers, but they began to concentrate more on gathering a smaller selection of food and invented smaller tools to help them hunt. The 5th member of genus Homo that evolved from Homo erectus, Homo neanderthals. Homo neanderthals lived in Europe and Southwest Asia. Their characteristics were: 1. The first humans to work with their environment by farming, domesticating animals, and settling in villages. 2. The first fossils were founded in 1829 in Ingus, Belgium, which included bones and part of the skull. The skull had a prominent bony brow ridge and large, wide nostrils. 3. The body was larger, stockier, with shorter legs. 4. Their stockier body helped them preserve heat in cold climates. 5. They were named after the archaeological site. Their fossils were discovered in Neander Valley, Germany. And lastly, 6. These fossils were never found outside Central to Western Eurasia. The 6th member of genus Homo that evolved from Homo erectus, Homo denisovan. The characteristics of Homo denisovan. 1. Their genetics tell us that this genus Homo was able to survive in areas that had less oxygen, such as in mountains, so it is a possibility that this genus group lived in mountainous regions. 2. Scientists named this Homo genus after the cave where their first DNA specimens were found, Denisova Cave in the Altai Mountains of Siberia. 3. Archaeologists had only found one finger bone, 2 teeth, and a toe bone to work with. And 4. Their bones found in Java and China look a lot like the much older Homo erectus fossils from Africa. Part 4. Africa is the cradle of humanity. There is a mitochondrial DNA of a black-skinned woman, nicknamed Eve, in sub-Sahara Africa. This discovery proves that the archaic to Homo sapiens process took place in Africa and existed from creating over 1 million of Eve's children. Population. This proves Africa is where every human being in the world comes from. The evolution from archaic to modern Homo sapiens seems to have occurred in only one place, Eve's family. The recent advances in genetic technology has enabled scientists to decipher the history of our species. Part 5 explains further. Part 5. Mitochondrial DNA. What is mitochondrial DNA? 1. It is a DNA that is only inherited from mother to child. 2. It is traced back to the most recent common female ancestors of all humans. 3. It can be passed on to both sons and daughters, but the son cannot pass along their mother's mtDNA to their children. 4. It is transmitted through the female egg. 5. Mitochondria are tiny structures that exist within every cell. Their job is to help cells use oxygen to produce energy. And lastly, this DNA is not the same as DNA in chromosomes. In the nuclear chromosomes, which is inherited from both parents, everyone gets their mitochondria DNA from only one parent, their mother. The children of Eve dated back to Africa around 120,000 BC after a major volcanic eruption at Mount Toba in Indonesia. 1 million of Eve's children were killed, reducing them to only 4,000. This volcanic eruption occurred about 75,000 years ago. The group of Eve's offsprings that survived was the strongest, cleverest, and had the greatest ability to survive in the new environment. These Homo sapiens were the most adaptive of Eve's children. We gained our modern-day human immune system from them. Those 4,000 Homo sapiens that left their homeland are the only population of Eve's children that is considered humans. There is a documentation by archaeologists that around 65 million years ago, human footprints along with dinosaur tracks were found not only in North America, but also in Russia and other parts of the world. In 1970, archaeologists that are trained in carbon dating artifacts analyzed burned objects found near an old campfire. Those artifacts were found west of Mexico City. The artifacts were dated as far back as 250,000 years old. 15 years later, another campfire was found north of Mexico City, and it was also 250,000 years old. Around 40,000 years ago, some of the species that existed in Central and East Asia, Europe and Southwest Asia, and Southeast Asia began to inbreed with the archaic human species in Levant, Asia, and Europe. Over time, Homo sapiens replaced all other hominins. Part 6. The continent of Lemuria, the motherland of man. Many of the Homo sapien population migrated to an island called Mu, Greeks called Lemuria, located in the Indian and Pacific Oceans around 75,000 years ago. This location, area now called Hawaii, was the perfect place to host the Mus, a growing species trying to establish a stronger connection in the physical world. Lemuria was not a kingdom, but a culture spread out over a series of islands and land masses called the Pacific Motherland. Mu is often referred to as Earth's cradle of the Homo sapiens, the first civilization in the world. The inhabitants of the motherland of Mu were the first to develop a high civilization. But in prehistory, people thrived throughout the world just as they do today. The Mus were spiritual, and their consciousness was focused on the spiritual dimensions. They were harmonious, peaceful beings with open hearts that allowed them to express unconditional love to their Creator and all of creation. All other Homo sapiens around the world learned from the Muse. They taught spiritual knowledge of the higher power, the creator of all Homo sapiens. This was the beginning of many Homo sapiens or species around the world, creating their own belief systems from teaching of Mu's spiritual way of life. Many religions and ways of life eventually developed. Because the Muse drew light directly from the four ascension planets, Sirius, Orion, the Pleiades, and Neptune. The Mu energy was very pure and innocent and healed the areas to which those planets were connected to. Each of these stars, constellations, and planets linked to a different part of the world, and those places were populated by Mu. Records show that Mexico and Central America were colonized and settled by people from the land of Lemuria. The Muse were more spiritually attuned than physically, and their consciousness was focused on the spiritual dimensions. They were harmonious, peaceful beings with open hearts that allowed them to express unconditional love to their Creator and all of creation. The Muse developed the 6 points resembling the Star of David. Looking at the diagram of the cosmogonic, the sun in the middle of the 2 interlaced equilateral triangles is a representation of God, the one incomprehensible creator. A circle also represents Mu's belief in reincarnation. This was long before it became known as the Jews' Magen David, or Star of David. Each elite black-skinned Mu priestess missionary carried a cosmogonic. It was the culture of the Mu elite priestess. The meaning of the cosmogonic diagram was taught thoroughly, and the priestess repeated what was written upon it as her spiritual convictions. Mu's culture and way of life. Lemurian people preferred to build small villages around ceremonial centers. This was similar to what we do now with our churches or place of worship in our neighborhoods. Their villages were around spiritual monuments. The Muse lived in small villages made up of wood and grass homes. They built great stone ceremonial centers which were located by the sea or river. Mu's Island had fertile soil with easy access to bananas, mangoes, taro, coconuts, cashews, and breadfruit. Their daily needs were met without hard work involved. They enjoyed handling the agricultural pursuits and spent their time farming. This created a surplus which could either be stored or traded with distant places. Without concern of the daily essentials, Mu's produced high levels of arts and sciences. Mu's culture and way of life included 1. Political power was shared equally. Each set of people with different skin color had a time to rule on Mu. This was called the solar way of life. As the sun has different phases of the year, so did the Mu's people of different cultures have political control. 2. Sometimes the blacks, sometimes the whites, and sometimes the brown-skinned people would have their time to be in power. 3. The people on Lemuria became skilled musicians, artists, and developed their own handwritten language. That language was spoken by everyone, and education was mandatory. 4. Mu's people were taught to live in harmony with the Creator's law, and they believed even though you could not see our Creator, you can see what the Creator does to communicate with us, such as the flowers and trees growing, and the sun and the stars above. 5. When it came to sexuality, guilt was not a part of it. It was merely an aspect of physical life. And lastly, 6. Mus lived together in groups and contributed to the community whatever they were best qualified to offer. The community shared everything. Therefore, there was no need for any form of monetary payment for one's work. Mus were spiritually involved. Mus realized the importance of forgiveness. They loved and had patience in all their relationships. For a long time, they are not interested in material possessions. The first spiritual muse were called Nacals, and they were responsible for making sure the colleges were teaching priesthood or religion and sciences. This included carrying copies of the motherland's sacred inspired religion to all of her various colonies. Mu's people were big on cooperation and spent much time in a highly concentrated meditation. This involved coming together to meditate on one objective as one. There were at times hundreds of participants. Mu's third eye. It wasn't exactly a third eye, it was a perceptive sensory organ. When a person stood still and concentrated on a subject, it assisted them in seeing things they normally would not be able to see. For example, a dangerous animal at a distance that would sometimes become bored and went hunting for humans. The third eye was actually a protrusion in the center of their foreheads. As long as they used this valuable organ, it was available for use, and most of the Mu's priestesses practiced using it. The Mu's population concentrated on using all their senses daily. Through meditation and their concentration on the spiritual, they believed in reincarnation and also believed they were all beams of light that would inevitably leave their physical bodies and return to the source from whence they came. The elite black-skinned Mu's priestesses gave the rest of the civilizations around the world mathematics, engineering, the ability to write, and taught them a simple and easily understood language. When the people of Mu accomplished what they believed was expected of them in this life, they had the capability of leaving their bodies and making the transition to the spirit world. The Mu's excelled in spiritual arts. The Mu's created lovely gardens that included waterfalls and exotic plants. They intentionally designed these temples for spiritual meeting places. They also built plazas, which were surrounded by massively broad staircases leading up to spacious platforms, along with smaller temples. Mu's constructed roads and praised their adored sculptures. Mu's building style were mostly right-angled and rectangular. Religious rituals and sporting events all took place at the ceremonial centers. Marriage customs for every person of Mu's. When a couple was ready to get married, they assembled into a circle in front of the village temple. The couple was instructed to remove all clothing and objects from their body. No objects were allowed with them, not even in their hands. Musicians played flutes and beat the drums as the man and woman walked to the edge of the town, with the instructions given verbally. Those instructions included walking together for at least 50 miles into the wilderness. They were told to stay there for 2 moon cycles. When the couple returned, they would both be required to be fully dressed in protective clothing made from animal skin, feathers, or fibers. If all instructions were followed and both agreed that the other person had provided and protected one another, the wedding took place. If they returned separately or expressed dissatisfaction with each other, there was no wedding service and they were never allowed a second chance. The main social unit in the times of the Mu people was the Ohana. The elders of the family were the rulers because they were the eldest and were considered the wisest. They were, and are today, called Kupuna. Amongst these elders were to be found the Kuhana. They were the keepers of the secrets or knowledge, but also was and is the master of a certain discipline. The Kupana handled all disputes within the family, and also any problems that family members had with members of another Ohana. This system could be compared to a legal system. Mu's governing system. The people of Mu were of a very peaceful and high-evolved race. There were no kings, no great warlords, no great armies, and no system of laws. Mu's people didn't believe in having a military force, police, standing armies, or navy. Mu priests utilized their wisdom to rule their many kingdoms or colonies, and was very successful. Mu's ability to govern was one of their greatest achievements. As a result, they never had to worry about a corrupt government, and their civilization progressed for thousands of years, steadily advancing in science and technology. The elite black-skinned Mu priest missionaries traveled everywhere around the world, teaching their beliefs and bringing civilization to lands like Gobi Desert, Peru, Africa, the Yucatan, Europe, and more. The elite black-skinned Mu priests missionaries became known as the world leaders in religion and philosophy. The symbolic flower of Mu, the lotus. The lotus flower was always looked upon as the most sacred of all flowers. It was selected as Mu's floral symbol. The lotus was the first flower to beautify the earth. Being the first flower in Mu, the motherland where man first appeared on earth, made Mu and the lotus flower symbolic synonyms. The lotus was indigenous to Mu. The plant was carried to all parts of the world by colonists, so that wherever we find the lotus today, we know that the parent stock, like the parent stock of man, came originally from Mu. The golden sun disk. The sun disk was once placed on the altar in the Temple of Divine Light on the motherland Mu Island. It symbolized the great cosmic sun, or the creator. This disk served as a focal point of concentration during meditation. It also had other more remarkable functions. The sun disk helped to keep the earth rotating on its axis instead of getting off kilter. Only the high priests and priestesses had access to it. When concentrating on it or in the presence of the sun disk, they would become relaxed and peaceful. The beginning of the end. During this time on Earth, oceans would rise and fall. When conditions deteriorated through flooding as ice, dunes, or lakes submerged or remade landscapes, species retired to places of ecological sanctuary or refuge. The sinking of Lemuria could have also been a result of a glacial period. An interglacial period followed by a glacial period, and warmer climate followed colder temperatures. Those places of refuge were islands isolated by rising seas or mountain peaks that served as islands. They could be considered as wet gullies or oases amid deepening deserts, caves and otherwise sheltered sites where could weather the climatic storms. Volcanoes were also known to erupt at times. The elite black-skinned Mu priestesses and her followers of the missionaries' holy people or prophet of Mu culture began receiving information that the earth was going to go through a very dramatic shift. This elite Mu priestesses and her followers of missionaries or holy people of Mu were very much in touch with the land. The elite black-skinned Mu priestesses and her followers of missionaries realized that there was no hope for their beloved Mu Island. To ensure that the knowledge of the motherland of Mus would always be remembered, the elite black-skinned Mu priest missionaries constantly worked at collecting and preserving knowledge to ensure that the mother island of Mus would always be remembered. The elite black-skinned Mu priestess and her followers of missionaries sailed away before the natural disaster to set up Mu along now called Mexico, shores of Oaxaca and California, Santa Barbara. They migrated throughout America, making settlements. There are tablets found in Mexico written in the Naga symbols and characters. Legends say that they were originally written in the motherland Mu. This elite black-skinned Mu priestess and her followers of missionaries made a point of carrying information with them and carefully concealing it for the future generations like themselves or even those who were not from Mu. In addition to the precious knowledge, the elite black-skinned carried the valuable and unusual golden disk of the sun to America. Part 7. The Lemurian Seed Crystals. The story told throughout Mu culture about Lemurian seed crystals. The elite black-skinned Mu priestess and her followers of missionaries prepared for this great cataclysm by programming seed crystals with their knowledge of the earth and of Homo sapiens history. In other words, the crystals were record keepers. The Mu priestess' great gift was earth healing, and they programmed crystals with unconditional love and cosmic connections. Having seeded the crystals, the elite black-skinned Mu priestess and her followers of missionaries went into inner earth, now called Mexico shores of Oaxaca and California, Santa Barbara, migrating throughout America, making settlements. A Lemurian seed crystal is usually either a communicator or healer. With most of them being communicators, these crystals may be in a range of colors including clear, smoky, green, pink, blue, citron-colored, or apricot, or what are commonly known as golden healers. They have deep ridges on the sides, like a ladder, and this is the major characteristics that identifies them. Lemurian crystals are all wands and, as such, conduct, amplify, and focus the universal life force. Part 8. The Destruction of Lemuria. After the volcanic eruption during 75,000 to 28,000 BC, the glaciation areas completely melted, making the water rise, and caused the Mu's island to sink slowly. Another set of other elite black-skinned Mu priestess missionaries journeyed to Africa, where they made settlements in Africa Upper Nile Valley with the Naga. After some conflicts, the two cultures combined and the country became a spiritual, scientific, and cultural center. Some of the black-skinned Mus sailed to Oceania. The Tahitians, or Maoris, are a nation and Polynesian ethnic group native to the Polynesia Islands and is where a lot of the elite brown-skinned Mu priestess missionaries migrated to. The Menehune are Hawaiians who arrived there before the Tahitians, Tibetans, and Maoris arrived from Polynesia. When other Mus in the eastern regions of Mu Island realized a major natural disaster was imminent, many of the Mus left their homes and their predecessors left to Peru or moved to Central America. The Peru Mus was successful in their attempts to preserve knowledge. They chose to carry records and artifacts to the east to South America, west to India and Tibet. This was achieved because Mu Island was once connected to Peru and the other islands, so it made it easier to relocate. Like all the other elite Mu priestess missionaries, they moved far inland to secluded areas and mountains to avoid contact with contemporary civilization. When the major flood came, all the Lemurians who were underground were safe from the waters, even though many people on the surface of the earth perished. When the waters receded, the people emerged from underground. The land they once knew was now very different. Many of the elite white-skinned Mu priestess missionaries didn't make it, and the few that did sailed with elite black-skinned Mu priestess missionaries to North America and China. A lot of the white-skinned Mu priestess missionaries mixed in with the Asians who lived there. There is a wide spread of Mu teachings in Chinese and Japanese manuscripts. Conclusion. For the people on Mu, the Garden of Eden was not in Asia, but on a now sunken continent in the Pacific Ocean. Easter Island. The Easter Island, located in Chile, is one of the sacred and megalithic sites. Many believe that Easter Island was part of Lemuria. Its hundreds of colossal stone statues and written language point to an extremely advanced culture, yet appeared in the world's most remote spot. The legends of Easter Island speak of Hiva, which sank beneath the waves as people fled. There are 555 colossal statues carved out of stone at Easter Island. The largest one is 70 feet in height. All of the Hawaiian Islands and the atolls in Pacific Ocean included the coast of Japan, the Philippines, Australia, Easter Island, and into California, Alaska, Canada, and the area surrounding the Ring of Fire in the Pacific are remnants of an ancient civilization. Mu was an island that once stretched from the Peruvian shores of South America to the South China Sea and became stuck because of other volcano problems on the island that made the water levels rise by ice melting eruption. The only other city in the world made of basalt columns, like Lemuria, now lies 11,270 kilometers across the Pacific Ocean, off the small Caroline island of Pompeii underwater. Ice Key Point, Japanese island. Many believed below the ocean boulders near the South Japanese island of Yonaguni lies other underwater ruins associated with the lost motherland of Mu. These areas, as now called archipelagos, this was also what they called Mu Island, an underwater stone city that stretched 3 miles long and 100 to 20 feet below the surface. In 1986, a scuba diver, Kiachiro Erratic, diving off the coast of the island of Yonaguni, discovered something that may prove the existence of Mu or Lemuria. On the seafloor, he found many structures made from rock. These structures included unusual design structures and are now labeled as the Yonaguni monuments. Mu or Lemuria was not just a continent, but is better described as a uniform culture that extended in the south-central Pacific chains of islands and archipelagos. Mu's cultural influence would spread outward or intercontinental, and also had an impact on half the globe from Asia to Americas. The Mu energy was strongest in Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii, and the Polynesian Islands, part of Alaska and the northeast of Africa. In Africa, a little of Mu can be found in Morocco and Guinea. Mauritania, Algeria, Mali, and Senegal were fully Lemurian. Scattered across the Indian Ocean and Polynesia, and even to the west coast of California, different variations of Lemuria may still be found. We can also expect the overload of Mu's civilization to have left some impression on the cultures of the indigenous people living there. The 12 Lemurian Scrolls. Lemuria sunk at least 13,000 years ago. After the destruction of Lemuria as a continent and a nation, the priest took all but 3 of the sacred scrolls and placed 3 in Egypt at Abydos, 3 on the Altiplano of Peru at Lake Titicaca, and 3 returned to Lemuria, or at least its remnant of Kauai. After the sinking of Mu, there were many years that no history was recorded. Some say those scrolls contained the Eden codes of the earth that represents the original Garden of Eden and reveals the creation matrix for the planet Earth.